Alrighty, so in this video we're going to be reviewing Foods I Eat Every Week as a Nutrition Expert by JJ Virgin. Never really saw her channel before, never saw any of this, but once again, this was made under the review section of the content request under my Discord. So if you're interested in any content requests, once again, go join the Discord down below, throw it in the content requests. You can meet like-minded people as well. You can also ask me some general questions, nothing really too specific because specific stuff depends on the person. I'm not going to be explaining that. And the health consultations, I will eventually get that website set up. And once I get the website set up, then all of that will be way easier. And you guys can, if you're interested in all that stuff, because I've been getting requests for that all the time, then once again, yeah, it'll be all there in the link in the description eventually. So anyways, let's get to it and let's see what she has today. Alrighty.
The number one question I get asked is...
Oh, okay. I want to actually point this off right off the bat. Her skin is quite, in my opinion, is a little poor, but her bone structure is very good. So when this woman was younger, I am almost certain she was incredibly attractive. I feel like she probably was. You could just tell based on the cheekbones.
The number one question...
The cheekbones are really, really high. Although I will say her, the bottom part of her jaw is more so a bit more masculine kind of jaw, but that's besides the point. It doesn't really matter too much. Her overall facial structure actually looks like quite well, which I might even have something on facial structure eventually. I'm changing mine right now. It'll take some time. You'll probably might see differences in about weeks. Multiple weeks actually. That's beside the point. Anyways, let's see what she has to say.
Question I get asked is, what do you eat? So I'm going to open up my fridge and pantry and show you the foods I make a point to eat every week so I can stay strong, stay lean, and more importantly, have great, steady, sustained energy. And I'm going to show you what a typical day's menu looks like too. I'll share my little treats, and I'll also share where I wish I could do better. Now, the reality is I'm a pretty simple eater. I don't spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So that means it comes down to having the fridge, the freezer, and the pantry stocked well and planning ahead. So let's start with what I do over the course of the week, and then I'm going to break it down so you can see what a typical day looks like. First, of course, let's start with protein, since that's always what I eat first. In the morning, it's pretty easy. I either am doing a protein shake, I'm doing Greek-style yogurt, and as far as yogurt goes, this is if I'm eating dairy or not. Sometimes I'll do coconut yogurt, and the goal is to get in some fermented food a few times a week. Now, I wish I was a fan of fermented veggies. I even went to Korea, tried it there. I don't like it. So unless dry...
Yeah, I'm going to say right now when it comes to, at the very least, hopefully she listens a little bit to her taste buds. Sort of sounds like it, sort of. But I can sort of see that based on her scan, something tells me she is not carnivore. I'm going to say that right now. So.
Farm wine counts, the way I'm getting my fermented food is dark chocolate and yogurt. So
yeah, all right. Well, I guess that one right at least. Yeah, she's definitely not carnivore. So when it comes to dark chocolate, once again, I'm not really a fan of anything if it's not meat, basically. If it's, okay, these are the only things that I will have that aren't meat, potentially sometimes. Cheese/dairy and bone broth. That's about it. In terms of vegetables, I have no craving for carbohydrates, any sort of carbohydrate whatsoever, any sort of sugar whatsoever. I do not crave. I have no desire to eat them at all. And I don't even, in fact, like the smell of them for that matter. And the reason, most likely, all of that occurred in the first place, because I didn't used to be like that, by the way. The reason that it most likely occurred has to do with gut bacteria. If you literally starve out the gut bacteria that are dictating all those signals of gimme carbs, gimme carbs, right? Get rid of them, you won't have those cravings anymore. But they take a little bit of while to get rid of, because not only will they prevent themselves from dying through stasis, they will also end up doing a couple other things. For instance, like eating your gut wall if you're not feeding them sometimes, but you it's better if you starve them out slowly. I made a video on that already. That's besides the point. How to transition carnivore, something like that. So that's 1. 2, I don't really think you need fermented food, honestly. It's not a necessity. You will do, if you eat just meat, you will do perfectly fine. You will be perfectly fine. Fermented veggies are, in my opinion, the worst option. So if you want a fermented version, try to have it along the lines of dairy and stuff, that sort of a thing.
The other protein in the morning that I'll tend to do are eggs.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She said dark chocolate. I will say eggs are good though. But she said dark chocolate. So dark chocolate, I'm not a fan of any sort of plant material whatsoever. And the reason I'm not is because they all contain some sort of phytotoxin, which will screw up responses like multiple different ways. But in this case, when it comes to chocolate, we'll just tackle chocolate. Chocolate has a couple things in it. First, it has tannins because it's from the cocoa bean. So that's a no bueno. I'm pretty sure it has tannins. It also has oxalates in it. No bueno as well. You don't want those oxalates. Now, the reason why you don't want oxalates, especially in excess, or in this case, exogenous oxalates, like from a plant or something. The reason you don't want that is because those oxalates, what they do is they actually inhibit macrophage activity, which basically means your innate immune system, meaning it actually weakens your innate immune system. But you might say, but the body naturally produces oxalates as well, right? Yes, it does. And it produces it, it will naturally produce it, but it produces it as a waste product. So it's not like it's even using the oxalate in the first place. It's just a waste product. So I wouldn't really say you want this stuff, you want to be absorbing excess of this stuff when your body's like trying to get rid of it because it's a waste product, right? Like, why would you do that? That's one thing about chocolate. Another thing, I'm pretty sure it has caffeine, and you might say caffeine, coffee, right? That's not too bad. No, okay. My opinion, every one of these drugs and plant materials do screw with the body pretty well. You will usually only get the best benefits of carnivore when you start removing everything out. And when I say everything, I really do mean everything. So you have to be cutting out all of these things that you had before, like I did, for instance. I used to have ice cream all the time. I cut that out. I used to have chocolate all the time. I cut that out. And you might say, oh my God, you're not living life, right? No, okay. I am so thankful I cut those out. Before, originally, I was trying to come up with any sort of argument to myself that I could come up with saying, hey, why can't I eat this chocolate? Why can't I eat this ice cream? But then the longer I cut it out, the more of a benefit I experienced. And the more I realized, like, holy shit, my brain's working insanely well. Like, I'm actually able to think correctly. I'm able to think properly. And not only am I able to think properly and pretty sharp for the most part, and I test this using League of Legends. I get Challenger in League of Legends. Not only do I do that, I also do a couple other things like YouTube, for instance, talking off the bat as well in terms of the biochemistry behind any of this stuff, which we will get into eggs eventually, and just being able to use my brain. I mean, it makes, makes everything a million times easier. Once again, if you're interested in all the details behind all of the health stuff that I'm talking about in scientific detail with sources cited, go check out the Real Nutrition Science playlist or the Min-Maxing Health playlist. Either of those two work. So yeah, eggs are very good. I would say the egg whites are not really so important. The egg yolks are where all the good stuff is at. So if you do have eggs and you want to like min-max the eggs in this case, get rid of the whites, keep the yolks, don't cook the yolks, and yeah, cook the whites if you do choose to have the whites. Because the whites have something called trypsin inhibitors in them, which like sort of mess with your stomach. No bueno, you don't want that. Especially if you're sensitive like me. If you have a more sensitive stomach, then you especially don't want these.
Eggs and egg whites with a little sheep's milk feta. Rest of the day, it's grass-fed beef, ground or New York strip, grass-fed lamb, wild fish.
What the heck?
Kind of stick with salmon or Chilean sea bass, and then occasionally some scallops or some shellfish. I love.
Okay, wow. Wasn't expecting that. She's not carnivore, but she does seem to be in the keto area. So yeah, I would say all of those are really good. I guess we'll go through each one of them. So grass-fed beef, this is like perfect. Okay, this is I made a meat tier list video. If you're interested, go check that out. This is on S tier. This is S tier.
Ground or New York strip, grass-fed lamb.
That's S tier.
Wild fish.
Depends on what kind of fish it is. Salmon, I'd say I'd put it in S tier only specifically because of the EPA and DHA content relative to the amount of mercury that you're getting as well. The amount of EPA and DHA in it is insanely high, especially in comparison to beef. It's literally like at least 10 times, I think, the amount. It's insane. Like, the amount is really, really, really high. And these polyunsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fat is good and bad, but it depends on what kind it is, as well as the quantity. So first, you get a much better or lower inflammatory response from the conjugated version, and that has to do with the fact that basically it's less prone to lipid peroxidation. I'm pretty sure as one example. It's the way the steric hindrance basically is like shaping the molecule, or it's not steric hindrance shaping the molecule, but the molecule has like a lot of steric hindrance on the outside. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's way better to have it in its conjugated form. And not only that, in its non-conjugated form, it is way more inflammatory, and not only that, it is way more susceptible to lipid peroxidation, which is huge, because if you don't know how big of the deal that is massive. That's like really a big deal.
Kind of stick with salmon or Chilean sea bass, and then occasionally some scallops or some shellfish. I love shellfish, but sadly my husband doesn't, so it's one of the things I get when I go out. And pastured chicken, especially pastured chicken thighs in the...
This is like a B tier meat in my opinion. Usually, I'm not white meat. You want to be not having as much of. It's not bad. Once again, meat tier list playlist video explains this. Like, it's not bad to have this every once in a while, but I don't recommend having this regularly, because you will get you could anyways. I was a great example of this, actually. You get something called keratosis pilaris, which is basically like see if I can show you an example of this. Maybe I still have it. No, I don't have it. It's mostly pretty gone, but there'd be like little dots everywhere, all on your next to my elbow, for instance, or maybe it might be next to my knee, might be on my thighs, right? This is keratosis pilaris, and it's basically just keratin buildup. Not really a big deal, but it doesn't really look too good. I wouldn't recommend it anyways. So yeah, this is one thing you want to be cutting out. You want to be not having as much of this stuff.
Air fryer, I love that, and Iberico pork chops.
Okay, pork chop is also B tier meat. Once again, I'm no big fan of pork chops. It's white meat versus red meat, completely different. So
I find that I rotate in like at least 9 different protein sources. So that's where I start. The next thing that I do are non-starchy vegetables.
Okay, so she sounds like she's a keto person, or she's trying to anyways, because she's specifically emphasizing on non-starchy vegetables. So when it comes to non-starchy vegetables, I would at least agree with her that if you want to do keto, this is probably like the best way to do it. You want non-starchy vegetables, because you don't want to be increasing the carbohydrate content, because we already know the insulin to glucagon ratio is incredibly important in dictating weight loss, as well as dictating the damage to your endothelium. Because yes, that's right, your endothelium gets damaged when there's extremely high insulin levels about, because those high insulin levels also dictate high blood glucose levels in most cases, and those high blood glucose levels are incredibly dangerous, because high levels of glycation is a no bueno. You don't want that, because you don't want your heart attacks. So yeah.
One of the things that is a staple for me is cauliflower rice, because I can keep it.
Okay, that's in my opinion, that's nasty. I didn't even like this when I was keto. And yes, I was keto for a bit. This tastes terrible in my opinion. I don't know how you have the taste for this.
In the freezer, and I can do all sorts of things with it. And I make a lot of pilafs with it, where I shove it.
You have to add like so much sauce to that stuff to make it palatable, in my opinion. It's terrible. Just this is just a difference in opinion. I despise the taste of that stuff.
And a lot of leftover vegetables, so whatever's left over, or I have other frozen veggies, I'll use all of that. Like last night, I made a cauliflower rice pilaf with a bunch of mushrooms in it, and then I added in...
I wouldn't recommend mushrooms. They have mycotoxins, basically a similar thing to phytotoxins, not necessarily ideal.
Some lentils, because we were having...
No. Okay, don't have lentils. God forbid. Please, no lentil leguma God, that stuff, no. Okay, you will mess with your stomach like big time. Don't do that. Please, God, don't do that.
Greek food.
There's something called, if you didn't know, lentils, or in this case, we'll say specific things. There are certain phytotoxins which are incredibly bad, and legumes and lentils can especially have those. Like, they're no bueno. They damage the tight junctions. You don't want that stuff at all. Once again, all the details in the Real Nutrition Science playlist. Yeah.
Other thing that I love, I try to eat a lot of mushrooms. So I try to eat mushrooms at least 3 times a week. Amazing for your immune system. And what we love to do is take...
If you really want stuff amazing for your immune system, you want to be cutting out the oxalate, because the oxalate will inhibit macrophage activity, which inhibits your innate immune system, right? So why would you want to do that, right? Yeah. Cut that out.
Mushrooms and onions, saute them in a little extra virgin olive oil, and then put them on our grass.
I recommend not cooking olive oil if you do choose to eat olive oil, by the way. Like, if you ever have any sort of these oils, the best possible option is to not cook them. And this is because when you cook them, you oxidize them. And oxidizing, especially polyunsaturated fat content, which is much higher in seed oils, by the way, or any sort of plant oil. When you oxidize those sorts of oils, ooh, you got some problems on your hands. That is where very cancerous off products come. Very cancerous off products come about. And just as an example, for instance, malonyl like, this stuff is, you don't want to be oxidizing. And by the way, your body can actually oxidize it as well, because lipid peroxidation can occur because of free radicals inside the body, produced often by oxidative phosphorylation, although it can come from protein folding in the ER as well. Once again, this stuff is not healthy. Don't do this. You don't want to don't cook it, okay? If you at the very least, if you have the vegetable oil, God forbid, do not cook in them. Like, that just makes them a million times worse as it is. They're already terrible, so don't make them worse.
Fed grass-finished steak. Now, onions are amazing because they are a great source of prebiotics, and if you're doing the red onions, you're getting some quercetin in there too. Plus that...
She actually just said quercetin as like being healthy. Okay. Yes, there's quercetin in red onions, but that's not actually healthy, okay? If you don't already know, quercetin is actually used as a chemotherapy drug. I actually have this in one of my videos. That's not healthy, all right? Like, the reason why, if you know how these chemotherapy drugs work, a lot of them work by inducing ferroptosis through reactive oxygen species formation. That's not good, okay? That basically means iron-dependent cell death. The cell is being forced to kill itself. Like, you don't want to be forcing the cell to kill itself for no reason, okay? If you're eating healthy, the cell should have no reason to kill itself unless it needs to go through autophagy for its own reason. And it will do that if glucagon is elevated and insulin is not elevated. Then you're perfectly fine. But on the other hand, if, for instance, quercetin exists in your system, which I'm assuming it does because she says quercetin from red onions, right? And you're eating that with carbohydrates as well, then not only are you having that compounding effect of insulin inhibiting autophagy, which is preventing the cell from killing itself, which allows it to potentially become a cancerous cell, you are also inducing reactive oxygen species formation and, by the way, killing not just the cancerous cells, but also your cells, because that's what quercetin does. That's what chemotherapy does. If you don't already know, like, the side effects of chemotherapy, they're horrifically bad. And why is that? Because you're not just killing off the cancer cells when you're doing chemotherapy. You are killing every single cell possible, okay? You're injecting basically chemicals into your body, and you're hoping to God that it targets that specific thing that you're looking to kill, which is the cancer in this case. But it doesn't just always do that, by the way, because that's not how chemical reactions work. If you don't know, like, collision theory or VTST at the very least, they're pretty good indicators of how chemical reactions occur. And you'll see, like, oh yeah, turns out this chemical reaction, even though this is the preferred one, this one can also occur. Right? So, That's actually what glycation sort of is in some sense, because glycation is an equilibrium thing. Not going to be explaining that in this one.
I love
If you're interested in all that, once again, Real Nutrition Science playlist in my homepage.
having that left over. That's an easy thing, again, to add into the cauliflower to make that pilaf. Brussels. Okay, I know they're polarizing. You either love them or you hate them. What I like to do...
They're terrible. Yeah, they're horrifically bad for you. Okay, like, just to give you an example of how bad, or Brussels sprouts in this case, just to give you an example of how bad they are, one of the very good indicators to tell you whether or not something is or isn't, like, healthy for you, just give it to a baby. You give that baby Brussels sprouts and you give that baby meat. I want you to tell me which thing that baby is going to choose. I can guarantee you it's not the Brussels sprouts. Okay? Even Gotis, for that matter, made a video on this. Like, the only black pill video you need. And he shows, like, clear differences. How babies literally, like, they refuse to eat the broccoli, the Brussels sprouts, you name the plant material, doesn't matter. But they will gladly indulge themselves in the meat, like, without even a question. In fact, if it's even moving and alive and it's in a sort of insect kind of thing, they would even rather eat that. Like, this is just like you don't really realize how far away you are from nature until you see that, in my opinion. You see a little bit of that. You see, like, the before and after difference, which I'm glad he did a very good compiling of, because in my opinion, it's a good compiling. I don't completely agree with the entire video, but I will say it's a very good compilation of things, which are very important. I think people should see it. So go watch that video if you haven't seen it already. In my opinion, it's a pretty good video.
Do with Brussels sprouts is I steam them lightly, and then I coat them with some olive oil and a little bit...
Okay, yeah, once again. This is like olive oil. You're coating it and then roast in the oven. Like this, you're just making it worse and worse and worse. Like, I don't mind if you try to cook the saturated fats, which is like the animal fats, because you can barely cook them because they're saturated, because they can't really be oxidized that easily, because they don't have a double bond. That's what makes them saturated. But if you're doing this with olive oil, I mean, the amount of polyunsaturated fat content in this and how susceptible it is to lipid peroxidation as well as being oxidized, like, God, that is just making it really unhealthy. Like, what you're doing, like, just to give you a sort of example, like how you can see this the way I do. Imagine, maybe that's a little overkill. I was gonna say eating plastic. Just imagine eating plastic and now cooking plastic and then eating plastic. Which one do you think is healthier, right? They're both not healthy, but the cooked plastic is way worse, right? Okay, well, that's one way you can, like, look at it. I wouldn't necessarily say that's like a super accurate way. Maybe this is a better way to sort of explain this, okay? When you are eating plants, let's equate it to this. When you are eating plants, you are also sort of just drinking alcohol. Just imagine drinking alcohol and eating plants. Sort of a similar kind of reaction. You're damaging the body, except you're damaging it in different ways. The alcohol in this case targets the liver specifically. Certain phytotoxins can target the liver as well, but that's besides the point. Whereas when you're eating the plants, you're not actually targeting the liver, depending on which plant you eat. Sometimes, if you are eating certain plants, for instance, that quercetin, for instance, you are actually just damaging the entire body, and you're doing it at a very, very, very small scale. And this is because that quercetin, once again, induces reactive oxygen species formation through ferroptosis. Why would you want to do that? It's a chemotherapy drug. Why have extra chemotherapy, right? Like, what are you doing? So you could sort of equate it kind of like that. I wouldn't say it's the same as alcohol, because alcohol is like a very specific thing. It targets the liver, and it specifically targets the liver because bilirubin ends up getting formed. And if you don't know what bilirubin is, it's basically like a heme group from a red blood cell, basically binding to a hepatocyte. You don't want that stuff. That's not healthy. Not good. So yeah, that's bad. And now when you're roasting all of this in the oven, that's kind of like drinking alcohol and at the same time doing other drugs with it. Like, it's only like a compounding effect, if you sort of get what I mean, right? So having your olive oil and having your Brussels sprouts in olive oil and balsamic vinegar. Okay, that's your sort of alcohol. And now when you roast it in the oven, you're just mixing it with like tons and tons of different drugs, which by the way is really bad, because if you don't know, when you mix alcohol with other drugs, it only increases the bioavailability of those other drugs. So that's why they always say, or hopefully anyways, they say on the back of medication packages, do not have this with alcohol. That's why, because what you're doing is you're increasing the bioavailability like through the roof. And the drug is designed for it to be a specific bioavailability. And if you have too much of it, right? Big problems happen. So don't do this.
Bit of balsamic, and I roast them in the oven until they get a little crunchy, and I love them. The other thing I love, and we do a couple days a week, is broccoli, because it's so easy. And we just put
This is not healthy once again. You can see, just to give it to a kid. Like, I can give you the science behind it, but honestly, the best way to do this is just throw this at a kid's face or a baby's face and like be like, go eat it. And I guarantee you that kid ain't gonna be munching down on that stuff so happily. It's gonna take a little bite of it and it's gonna and then it's gonna start crying and some shit like that. Okay, don't do that. Instead, eat meat. Not really that hard. It's really not that hard.
a little bit of grass-fed ghee with it. Green beans with mushrooms is another staple.
All right, I'll give her credit. Yeah, ghee's good. This is really bad. You don't want green beans.
I'll saute up.
Mushrooms, not necessarily a fan of those either. Are mycotoxins or phytotoxins worse? Honestly, it depends on which kind of variety you're dealing with. Certain mycotoxins are extremely poisonous, similar to that of plants. I mean, they're literally like sort of similar organisms. They can't move, right? They can't mechanically move themselves. So how are they supposed to defend themselves? Chemically, obviously, right? So there's different ways to defend yourselves. That's a pretty common one throughout the animal kingdom, as well as archaea. Actually, even bacteria will also sometimes produce toxic off products, as an example. So
some mushrooms, steam some green beans, put them together. Asparagus, I have a recipe in my Virgin Diet cookbook for asparagus with a little lemon rind
I
on top.
knew it. You see that? I told you. When this woman was younger, she was really attractive. You could just tell based on the bone structure. Like, her bone structure is so defined. It's so obvious.
Love.
But her skin's terrible. Like, I gotta be real with you. Her skin's really, really bad. In terms of elasticity, it's not really up there that much.
Asparagus because of the prebiotic fiber in it. One of the things I keep in the freezer is a frozen pepper blend. So I keep frozen mushrooms, I keep frozen pepper blend. Peppers are fantastic to just throw again into the pilaf, or if I'm doing like a Mexican food night.
I just want to know her reasoning why. Like, I can't see it. Every single time I do one of these critiques, I can't really see their point, because the counter argument to their point, for instance, she'll say like, oh, polyphenols. And then I'll say, well, it actually increases it forces the body to increase its own antioxidant content. So actually this polyphenol is not doing its job. In fact, it's acting as a pro-oxidant rather than an antioxidant in the body. So isn't that a little strange, huh? Why would polyphenols be helpful, right? There is like a very small situation where I could say polyphenols could be helpful, and then that's like acting as an antibiotic. I'm not going to be explaining that, but this is sort of like an example, right? What's the real point of it? It's not actually healthy.
I'll use them there, so that's one I keep in. Now, spinach for me is not one that I love, but what we every once in a while will do is spinach with some mushrooms, so we'll saute that and then put our Chilean.
If you don't love it, then, like, I gotta be honest, don't eat it. Okay, in fact, I will even say this. I like Gotis's version of eating way more than this sort of a thing, okay? Like, in my opinion, have like fruit with it or something. Like, if you're really addicted to sugar and if you have that sugar craving, then eat the freaking sugar. Don't eat this spinach shit, okay? This is like terrible. This is extremely loaded in oxalates. Like, why would you do that, okay? Like, if you, not only that, it's just like, Okay, what kind of damage would you like to induce in yourself when you're eating this sugar stuff and you're mixing it with meat? You're sort of playing with the Randle cycle that really messes with arteries and basically the vascular system. No bueno, you don't want that. So I really don't recommend that, but God forbid, like this stuff, it doesn't even taste good. You're not even getting bang for your buck when you're eating this, right? Like, I don't think there's any... even freaking cows can't eat this stuff, okay? Like, if you ever give a cow spinach and kale, they will die from hemolytic anemia if they graze on that stuff too much. Because, yes, oxalate content will literally do that, because oxalates can do that. It's like, the stuff is nasty, okay? There's a reason each animal... in at least herbivores for the most part, each herbivore for the most part is pretty well designed to eat a specific kind of plant. And if it doesn't eat that specific kind of plant and it's not suited because its body basically isn't able to get rid of all of these phytotoxins, all this other stuff, then you got some problems on your hands. Or that animal has some problems on its hands. And lo and behold, now it starts having hemolytic anemia in cows, for instance, when they eat spinach or kale. And the reason, and by the way, hemolytic anemia, just to, like, if you don't know what that is, that's basically suffocating even though you're breathing in air. Yeah, that means your red blood cells are dying off faster than they can be created. Okay, that is a nasty way to die. That is sick. Like, I can't tell you how sick of a way that is to die, but that's a really bad way to die. In fact, I don't even think there is anything in nature that maybe except certain phytotoxins, but there is no thing in nature that is that catastrophically, horrifically, just a sick way to die. That's bad. Okay, that's really, really bad. Breathing in air and not actually ever getting in air. Like, imagine that. Just imagine that. Breathing every single time you take a breath, you're actually holding your breath and you're never getting in air. Even when you exhale. Inhale, exhale, doesn't matter. You're never getting any oxygen. It's like, that's just sick, man. That's really sick.
Sea bass on top of that. The one I do love is spaghetti squash. So we do spaghetti squash, and I'll just make a bunch of it because it's such a great one to have around for leftovers. And you can do some pesto on top or some marinara sauce. The other thing I love to use for pasta is hearts of palm pastas.
Okay, once again, this stuff is just nasty. Don't eat carbs. I'll keep it at that at this point.
So spaghetti squash is one, hearts of palm pasta, I found it at Trader Joe's, is another. And hearts of palm are just a fun thing to throw in your salads. Speaking of salads, I pretty much stick with arugula. And if I'm really getting fired up, I will actually add in some cucumbers and radishes. I tend to be pretty lazy.
Oh my god. Okay, that stuff tastes nasty in my opinion. Like, holy crap. When you actually eat that stuff, I can't. I don't know. How can anybody eat a radish or even a turnip? Radishes or turnips, like, holy crap. They taste so bad. It's on a different level. Like, you compare radishes and turnips to something like an orange. Oh my god. Even, like, all of this stuff, by the way, isn't natural. Like, any sort of vegetable or fruit that you're eating, no human in the past before 12,000 years ever ate any of that stuff. And yes, that has to do with the agriculture revolution. If you're interested in that video, by the way, Real Nutrition Science playlist, I'm pretty sure I have a video on that. I talk about, like, anthropology and stuff. Yeah, that was the anthropology one. Pretty interesting. Don't need it.
About my cooking, but if I get fired up, I'll make enough cucumber and radishes so I have it for a couple days in a row, and sometimes I'll add in some multicolored baby carrots. Now, one thing that I love, and I try to do this when I'm out at restaurants, I literally bought this for home and kind of went, I don't know what to do with this, is I love rainbow chard, I love artichokes, I hate dealing with them at home, and I especially love sunchokes, which are a great source of prebiotic fibers and glutathione.
Oh boy. All right. Yeah, you don't need all of these antioxidants if your body isn't producing tons of reactive oxygen species, okay? That's literally what glutathione does. It acts as an antioxidant, but the thing is, you're not going to need this glutathione if your body isn't producing tons of reactive oxygen species. And how could you get those reactive oxygen species? Oh yeah, that's right, from the quercetin that you just mentioned earlier. That will give you more reactive oxygen species. Like, why would you... Okay, if you understand... I didn't actually explain this yet. This is a good point. If you don't already understand, plants are actually trying to kill themselves at a very rapid rate. Yes, I know that sounds ridiculous, but they are. And this has to do with the rubisco enzyme, and it has to do with like how they're designed. They have such high amounts of polyunsaturated fat, and yet at the same time, they produce so much reactive oxygen species that they are forced to have tons of vitamin E, which, by the way, vitamin E acts as a lipid. It prevents lipid radicals from forming. Vitamin E, yes, that's right. Plants need that way more than we do because we don't have tons of polyunsaturated fat flying about, but they do. And it's like a really interesting defense mechanism, in my opinion. I think this is like an ingenious kill yourself at such a rapid rate that any sort of predator that tries to eat you actually ends up suffering and getting poisoned, which like you could sort of see in her skin, I guess, a little bit. In my opinion, her skin would be way better if she was carnivore. Like, this is, in my opinion, this is a no-brainer. She also does look like she works out quite a bit, which people might say, oh, that's like really healthy, right? I'd be a little careful with that. If you're carnivore, it's especially not healthy. But in her case, because she's eating exogenous glucose, I would actually say, technically speaking, it is healthy for her, but it's still not ideal. This is not optimal health.
So, and by the way, like restaurants, when you think about it, are a great time to go in and get the things you wouldn't normally do at home. But I'm going to give you a little warning there. Brussels sprouts in restaurants are kind of like dessert, let's be honest. Like, usually they're deep fried, they're usually got sugar on them. They're amazing, but don't kid yourself into thinking it's some kind of a healthy choice.
Yeah, in my opinion, you don't eat at restaurants. Like, I'm going to be honest, this is one of the cons of carnivore. It's very difficult to eat at a restaurant and actually have them serve you what you want. Because you'll be like, hey, can I have this meat? And they're like, yeah, it's marinated. It's like, well, I can't eat it marinated, right? And they'll be like, oh, well, too bad it's marinated. But if you want, you could try this one over here. And it's like, oh, great. And it's like, oh, yeah, we seasoned this one in pepper before and after, salt and pepper. It's like, well, I can't have pepper, right? So it's this whole cascading thing where it's just this pain. It's a giant pain in the ass. Please, God forbid, somebody out there watching this channel make a freaking carnivore restaurant app or something that ranks like how carnivore a restaurant is, because holy crap, this is a disaster. Okay, anybody who's carnivore will completely agree with me on this one. Going out to a restaurant can be such a pain in the ass sometimes, especially if you're trying to eat healthy, because they don't ever actually serve you what you're looking for. I'm just looking for a steak, okay, lady? You're not going to give me a steak, really? Because you're seasoning it and freaking marinated in some sort of, I don't know, sauce of wine and whatever, red wine and something. And you're also sticking tons of, like, vegetables on the side, which I don't want. You can remove the vegetables on the side, great, but you don't remove the pepper, right? So it's, yeah, this is, in my opinion, I will say this is a con of carnivore. This is a very big con of carnivore, but I think it's one that's worth it. It definitely does limit the social aspects that you're able to basically go with, right? Like you're very, very quickly limiting all the social activities that you can do. But in terms of health, it is superior. It doesn't even come close. It's not even remotely close to anything else.
It's probably not. Now, what I find in a week is my goal.
And yes, she's right. It's not. And the reason is because the restaurants will also cook it in canola oil and all that other sort of polyunsaturated fat, because that's the cheapest option. Once again, not healthy.
Is to get at least 5 servings of non-starchy vegetables each day, but I usually get about 10. Half a cup of cooked or a cup raw as a serving. And
yeah, once again, if you could just like give me like a valid reason as to why it's healthy, then I might be like, okay, but the problem is that every single argument, I've already went over every single argument in the Real Nutrition Science playlist, and there isn't really an argument to say any sort of fruit or vegetable is healthy. Like, none of them. None. Not even one. Okay? So, you could say a specific component of that fruit or vegetable could act as being healthy. In some certain circumstances, I would agree with that. But in most cases, in like 90% of cases, or 99% of cases for that matter, I'd say like, no, it's just not healthy. There's no reason to have that whatsoever, especially for the human body.
And my goal is to get at least 8 different types of non-starchy vegetables a week. And I find that I have to focus on that because I get in a rut. Like I'd be doing broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts every day if I didn't watch out for it. Now, as far as starchy vegetables go, I'm just not that big of a fan, but my husband needs to get them in. And so
why? Like your husband doesn't need to get them in. He wants to get them in. There's a big difference between the two, in my opinion. It's this is a want. This is much more so of a want. The body literally does not need any sort of exogenous carbohydrate whatsoever. It's called gluconeogenesis. Your body is really damn good at making its own glucose.
We tend to do this is more at lunch. You know, you're most insulin sensitive in the morning. So when you think about it, where are you going to be best? I find that if I eat too much starchy carbs in the morning, my blood sugar doesn't feel good, but I like them more around lunch.
I will say that's actually a very good point that she made. When she eats too much carbs in the morning, she feels terrible. God, I grew up as a kid eating like so much fruits and vegetables in the morning. It's just tons of freaking carbs. And I felt awful. I was depressed as hell. It was a living nightmare. Getting up to school. Going to school was already a nightmare. That breakfast probably just only amplified it. It was probably like adding the drugs with the alcohol stuff. It's just, God, that was awful. I felt really bad. I was depressed. I was really, really depressed. I was depressed for a super long period of my life, like 6 years at least, minimum.
Too much starchy carbs in the morning, my blood sugar doesn't feel good, but I like them more around lunch, but that's when
You could also actually feel it, by the way, in your energy levels. You'll feel it in your eyes, usually. That's the best way I can describe this, and this has to do with the fact that orexin... So insulin inhibiting orexin will basically give you this. Orexin is the hormone related to alertness. So insulin inhibiting orexin in this case basically means that you eating all those carbohydrates in the morning actually is inhibiting your alertness, which is what's making you feel that tired or narcolepsy kind of feeling. Yeah, no bueno.
I tend to do more of my fruit, and Tim tends to do more of his starchy carbs. So what he likes to do are root vegetables, roast potatoes, smashed potatoes, wild or brown rice. That's an easy one. And we buy those wild or brown rices that are already cooked that you can just steam. We do not put them in the microwave. We steam them in a little pot on the stove. Lentils are one that I love. He'll do hummus a lot. I lived in Japan for a while, and I'm absolutely hooked on Japanese pumpkin. It's called kabocha squash. Super bright orange. You can actually eat the rind. It's amazing with a little bit of ghee. So I find maybe in a week I get like 2 servings in. Here's what I would do if I was in my perfect world. I eat more beets. It's one of the things I try to get whenever I'm out. I just don't really have too much of it at home because I find I buy them and they just seem to sit there, but I love a great beet salad, especially a golden beet salad when I'm out.
Once again, this stuff is just not healthy. I gotta be real with you, okay? This stuff is just not healthy. I mean, I think we'll quickly skip through some of this to see if it's actually valid. But I think I went through most of this.
Chocolate chips onto the top of my smoothie or on my yogurt, and if not, my
it's not healthy.
Power.
Amino power powder. It depends on if this is plant-based. I have no idea. Don't know what this is made out of. Don't recommend this. This is high in tannins. You don't want tannins because, once again, tannins will bind to those amino acids. So actually, all of this that you're having right here is getting depleted by this right here. Yeah, why would you do that, right? So that's a no bueno. I think for the most part, we pretty much went through most of this video. I think we made this video long enough as it is. So yeah. Alrighty. So, once again, thanks for watching. I hope you found the video helpful and informative. This is, once again, if you're interested in any content requests, link in the description. Throw it in the Discord content request. I will immediately put it on the do as a reaction video playlist, which I have. It's a playlist that I have. It's like 200 plus videos, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger so quickly to the point that I'm having I probably will never run out of content because you guys keep asking for it. So yeah, thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one, and go join the Discord. Yeah, peace.